The Forbidden Love, Part 1. Hoivi starts a new life at Mr. Hy's mansion. Stepping into Mr. Hy's opulent mansion, Hoivi couldn't help but feel overwhelmed. This was a world completely foreign to her. From the shimmering crystal chandeliers hanging from the high ceilings, the soft Persian carpets beneath her feet, to the lush garden meticulously manicured outside. Vi was acutely aware of the stark difference between this grandeur and her modest home in the countryside, where she had been trapped in a dull and painful life with Min Hai, her alcoholic and abusive husband. But Vi knew this luxurious life wasn't hers. Her role here was simple, a housemaid. From her very first day, Vi felt the gaze of Kwang Yan, the young master of the house, frequently lingering on her. He was a tall, handsome young man, but his demeanor radiated nonchalance and arrogance. That morning, while Vi was cleaning the living room, Kwang Yan appeared, leaning casually against the doorframe. "So you're Vi, right? You seem kind and quiet. I bet working here is tough, but I suppose you're used to it by now." Startled, Vi looked up, momentarily caught off guard by his direct gaze. "Yes, sir. It's my first day here, but I'll do my best." Kwang Yan smirked. "No need to act so tough. Around here, if you do well, you'll be rewarded. If not, people tend to notice." Though his words seemed like a warning, his gaze was anything but ordinary. Vi felt her cheeks flush. Lowering her head, she returned to her work, determined to ignore his presence. Discussion question. How should Hoivi respond to Kwang Yan's flirtatious behavior? Part 2. The arrival of Mr. Hai in an oppressive atmosphere. That evening, during her first dinner service, Vi stood quietly behind the family, maintaining her professionalism. Mr. Fan Hai, the mansion's owner, was an imposing man in his 50s, despite his age. He exuded charisma with his sultan pepper hair and calm, authoritative demeanor. His sharp gaze and deep voice commanded attention. Throughout the meal, Vi couldn't help but notice Mr. Hai's eyes frequently landing on her. Occasionally, he would ask seemingly innocent questions, but she sensed a deeper scrutiny behind them. "Vi, you cook well. I suppose you're used to taking care of your family back in the countryside." Feeling awkward, Vi replied softly, "Just simple dishes, sir." Kwang Yan interjected with a playful laugh. "Dad, stop making her uncomfortable. You always like to praise the new staff. And Vi, don't stress too much. If things get overwhelming, let me know. I'll help." His words, though light-hearted, introduced an undeniable tension at the table. Mr. Hai shot his son a sharp glance, but refrained from commenting further. Unexpected encounter in the study. One afternoon, while Vi was cleaning Mr. Hai's study, he suddenly entered the room, startling her. She quickly bowed, preparing to leave, but he gestured for her to sit. "Vi, I've noticed how hardworking and gentle you are. If you ever face any difficulties, don't hesitate to let me know. I'm always here to help." His voice was soft, yet Vi sensed an unusual closeness in his demeanor. His gaze lingered on her face a little too long before he finally left, leaving Vi confused and uneasy. Discussion question. Do you think Mr. Hai genuinely cares about Vi? Or does he have ulterior motives? Part 3. Forbidden relationships and V's inner struggle. From that day on, both Mr. Hai and Kwang Yan seemed to pay Vi increasing attention, though their approaches were drastically different. Kwang Yan, bold and straightforward, he sought her out often, making playful advances. Mr. Hai, subtle and calculated. His gaze and words carried an air of possession and mystery. One evening, while the family was out, Kwang Yan found Vi alone in the kitchen. Under the warm glow of the lights, he stepped closer, his eyes shining with determination. "Vi, have you ever felt like you deserve more? You're strong, but you're holding yourself back. You don't have to live like this." Vi stepped away, trying to maintain distance. "Sir, I'm just a maid. I don't think I have the right to want anything more." But Kwang Yan didn't back down. He reached out and took her hand, his voice filled with emotion. You deserve happiness. Vi, do you know how much I've thought about you since the day you came here? Startled, Vi pulled her hand away, but his sincere gaze had unsettled her, and for the first time, she felt her heart waver. A disturbing discovery, Vi's unease deepened when, while cleaning Mr. High's room one day, she discovered a hidden camera tucked into a corner. Though she said nothing, her intuition told her something was terribly wrong. Discussion question: what should Vi do after discovering the hidden camera in Mr. High's room? Part 4. The shocking revelation: Vi is pregnant. As time passed, Vi began experiencing unusual fatigue, morning sickness, and dizziness. One day, she discreetly bought a pregnancy test and used it in the staff bathroom. When two red lines appeared, Vi froze. Her mind went blank as the reality sank and she was pregnant. What terrified her more than the pregnancy itself was the question of paternity. Was the father Kwang An or Mr. Hai? The confrontation with Kwang An soon noticed Vi's change in demeanor. One afternoon, he approached her as she rested in the garden. Vi, you seem different lately. Are you okay? He asked, concern evident in his voice. Vi shook her head. I'm fine, sir. You don't need to worry about me. But Kwang An wasn't convinced. He gently took her hand, his tone firm. If something's wrong, you have to tell me. I'll take responsibility for whatever it is. Vi looked into his earnest eyes, her emotions conflicted. She wanted to believe him, but the shadow of Mr. Hai loomed over her thoughts. That evening, Mr. Hai summoned Vi to his study. His smile was cold, his tone laced with menace. Vi, is there something you want to tell me? Her voice trembled. No, sir, there's nothing. But Mr. Hai stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. I don't think that's true. I can sense when someone is hiding something. But don't worry, I'll find out soon enough. Discussion questions. How should Vi handle her pregnancy while keeping the truth hidden? Should she confide in Kwang An, or is that too risky given the situation with Mr. Hai? Part 5. The climax. The truth unveiled. 1. The confrontation between Kwang An and Mr. Hai. Kwang An's growing affection for Vi soon clashed with the domineering presence of his father. Late one evening, after overhearing a tense conversation between Mr. Hai and Vi, Kwang An stormed into his father's study. Dad, what have you done to Vi? Kwang An's voice was loud, filled with anger. Mr. Hai, seated calmly behind his desk, didn't look surprised. He leaned back in his chair, his sharp gaze directed at his son. What are you talking about? Kwang An, Vi is an employee here. You should stay out of things you don't understand. Kwang An slammed a USB drive onto the desk, his eyes blazing. Don't play games with me. I know everything. You've been using this footage to control her. Mr. Hai's face darkened for a moment before he let out a cold chuckle. You're so naive, Kwang An. Do you really think she's as innocent as she looks? Women like her only see us as opportunities. Kwang An clenched his fists, his voice trembling. You have no right to talk about her like that. Vi isn't like the others. She's kind, hardworking, and doesn't deserve what you're doing to her. Their argument grew louder, and the noise drew the attention of Mrs. Fan, Mr. Hai's wife, who happened to pass by. She entered the study, her voice sharp and commanding. What is going on here? Why are you two shouting like this? Kwang An hesitated, but the weight of his emotions was too much to bear. He turned to his mother and said, Dad has been blackmailing Vi using hidden cameras. He's been manipulating her. Mrs. Fan's face fell as she processed her son's words. Her gaze turned to her husband, cold and unforgiving. Is this true? Hai, have you stooped this low to add the truth and the fallout? Unable to deny the evidence, Mr. Hai attempted to defend himself. You don't understand, Fan. She's not as innocent as she pretends to be. I was protecting our family from a mistake Kwang An was about to make. But Mrs. Fan wasn't convinced. Her voice trembled with fury. Hai, your actions have disgraced this family I can't believe you'd use your power to manipulate and destroy someone's life. She turned to Kwang An. And how far are you willing to go for this woman? Do you even know if she's telling you the truth? Kwang An's response was immediate. I don't care. I love her, and I trust her more than I trust Dad right now. Mrs. Fan, heartbroken and overwhelmed, left the room without another word. Mr. Hai, sensing the fracture in his family, was left speechless. 3. Hoi V's decision to leave. That same night, Vi packed her things, determined to leave the mansion and the turmoil behind. She couldn't bear being the cause of so much conflict, and the thought of raising her child in such a toxic environment was unbearable. As she quietly made her way to the front door, Kwang An intercepted her. You're leaving, aren't you? He asked, his voice heavy with sadness. Vi nodded, tears streaming down her face. I have too. Kwang An, this isn't right. I can't stay here and let this destroy your family. He grabbed her hand, desperate. Don't go. Vi, we can leave together. We'll start fresh, somewhere far from here. But Vi shook her head. You don't understand. This isn't just about us. There's so much at stake, and I don't even know if this baby is yours. Her words hit Kwang An like a punch to the chest. He let go of her hand, his face contorted with pain. Does that matter? I love you. Vi, I'll love this baby no matter what. Despite his words, Vi made her decision. She kissed his cheek softly, whispering, Goodbye, Kwang An, before slipping out the door and disappearing into the night. For Mr. Hai faces the consequences. With Vi gone, Mr. Hai's actions began to unravel the family's carefully maintained facade. Mrs. Fan, unable to forgive him, demanded a separation. I can't stay with someone who manipulates others for their own gain. This family has been broken long enough, she declared, packing her belongings. Mr. Hai, for the first time in years, found himself alone, his power and pride unable to fix the mess he had created. 5. Kwang An searched for Vi. Refusing to give up, Kwang An left the mansion, determined to find Vi. He traveled from town to town, asking anyone who might have seen her. Months passed, and though his hope wavered at times, his love for Vi kept him going. Finally, in a small coastal town, Kwang An found her. She was working in a local cafe, her belly round with the child she carried. When their eyes met, Vi froze. Kwang An approached her slowly, his voice trembling. Vi, I found you. Tears filled Vi's eyes as she whispered, Why did you come, Kwang An? He took her hands in his. Because I love you. And I promised I'd never leave you to face this alone. 6. A new beginning. Vi and Kwang An decided to leave the past behind and start anew. They moved to a quiet village, far from the chaos of Mr. Hai's mansion. Though their future was uncertain, they vowed to face every challenge together. Vi gave birth to a healthy baby boy, and though the question of paternity lingered, it no longer mattered. They chose love and hope over fear and regret. Discussion questions. Did Vi make the right decision by leaving the mansion and starting fresh? Was Kwang An justified in leaving his family to follow Vi? Can Vi and Kwang An truly escape their past? Or will it eventually catch up to them? Part 7. The past catches up. 1. The quiet life interrupted. For a year, Hoi Vi and Kwang An lived a peaceful life in the small coastal village. Vi gave birth to a baby boy named Min, and the couple devoted themselves to raising him. Kwang An worked at a local repair shop, while Vi continued helping at the cafe. Though their life was modest, it was filled with love and hope. Kwang An treated Min as his own, and Vi began to believe they had finally left their troubles behind. But the past is never truly buried. One day, a luxury car rolled into the village, stopping in front of their small home. The sight of the familiar vehicle sent chills down V's spine. Mr. Hai stepped out, his sharp suit a stark contrast to the humble surroundings. His presence shattered the fragile peace Vi had built. Vi, he said, his tone soft but commanding. We need to talk, too. Mr. Hai's ultimatum. Inside the house, Vi sat tensely while Mr. Hai calmly sipped tea. Kwang Yan returned from work. Stand to see his father there. What are you doing here? Kwang Yan demanded. Mr. Hai set down his cup and fixed his son with a cold gaze. I came to fix what you'd have broken, he said. Turning to Vi, he continued, You've taken my son and destroyed our family. But I am willing to put that aside. Return to the city with Min, and I will provide everything you need a comfortable life for both you and the child. Vi's heart sank, and if I refuse? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Hai leaned forward, his voice dropping to a menacing tone. If you refuse, I'll ensure that your past follows you wherever you go. You won't find peace anywhere. Kwang Yan stepped in, standing protectively in front of Vi. No, Dad, you don't get to control us anymore. Vi isn't going anywhere, and neither am I. Mr. Hai's face hardened. You're choosing this life over everything I've given you. Yes, Kwang Yan replied firmly. Because Vi and Min are my family now. You can't buy them, and you can't break us apart. 3. A shocking revelation. As tensions escalated, Mr. Hai dropped a bombshell. Are you sure Min is even your family, Kwang Yan? He sneered. The words hung in the air like a dagger. Vi's breath caught, and Kwang Yan turned to her, confusion and hurt in his eyes. What is he talking about? Vi. Tears welled up in Vi's eyes. Kwang Yan's I don't know for sure. Kwang Yan staggered back, as if the ground beneath him had crumbled. Mr. Hai smirked, sensing his advantage. Exactly, you're throwing away your life for a child who might not even be yours. But Kwang Yan straightened, his resolve unshaken. It doesn't matter. Min is my son because I love him, and I love Vi. You can say whatever you want, but it won't change how I feel. For the DNA test, Mr. Hai, determined to regain control, insisted on a DNA test to determine Min's paternity. Though Vi resisted, Kwang Yan convinced her that it was the only way to put an end to his father's manipulations. The test results arrived 2 weeks later. When Vi opened the envelope, her hands trembled. She read the words silently before collapsing onto the couch. Kwang Yan, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Min isn't your son. He's. She couldn't finish the sentence. Kwang Yan sat beside her, taking the paper from her shaking hands. The results confirmed what they had feared. Min was Mr. Hai's biological son. 5. Kwang Yan's heartbreak. The truth broke Kwang Yan's heart, but it didn't shatter his love for Vi and Min. I don't care about the DNA, he said, holding Vi close. Min is our son. Nothing will change that. Mr. Hai, however, saw the results as an opportunity to assert his claim. Now you see, Vi, he said smugly, Min is my child. He belongs with me. Vi's fury boiled over. He doesn't belong to you. You don't deserve to call yourself his father after everything you've done. But Mr. Hai wasn't deterred. You can't deny my rights. Vi, legally, Min is mine. 6. A desperate escape. Realizing that Mr. Hai wouldn't stop until he took Min away, Vi and Kwang Yan made a difficult decision. Late one night, they packed their belongings and left the village, heading for an undisclosed location. With the help of friends and connections, they changed their identities and started over in a new city. The life became even more challenging. Vi and Kwang Yan were determined to protect Min from Mr. Hai's reach. 7. A new hope. Years passed, and Min grew into a happy, curious boy, blissfully unaware of the turmoil surrounding his birth. Vi and Kwang Yan worked tirelessly to provide for their family, their bond growing stronger with every challenge they faced. Mr. Hai, despite his resources, eventually gave up his search, realizing that Vi and Kwang Yan were willing to go to any lengths to protect their son, though the shadows of their past lingered. Vi and Kwang Yan found solace in their love and their shared determination to give Min a better life. Final discussion questions. Was Kwang An right to forgive Vi and accept Min as his own despite the truth? Should Vi and Kwang An have confronted Mr. Hai instead of running away? What would you have done differently if you were in V's position? Part 8. The Past Strikes Back. 1. The Unexpected Visitor. 5 years later. Hui Vi and Kwang An lived quietly in a small countryside village under new identities. Min, now 5 years old, was a lively and curious child, completely unaware of the storm surrounding his birth. One summer afternoon, as Vi tended to the garden and Kwang An repaired bicycles at a nearby shop, a black car pulled up in front of their modest home. A middle-aged woman stepped out, her face familiar yet unexpected. It was Mrs. Fan, Kwang An's mother. Vi froze, her heart racing as Mrs. Fan approached. "Vi," she said softly, her voice carrying both sadness and urgency. "I need to," Mrs. Fan's plea. Over tea, Mrs. Fan revealed the reason for her visit. After years of separation, she had divorced Mr. Hai and severed ties with his manipulative ways. "I left Hai, she, V's Ha," Mrs. Kwang An returned. 3. A trap unfolds. The meeting was set at a neutral location, a quiet restaurant in the city. Kwang An and Vi waited nervously, Min playing innocently beside them, when Mr. Hai arrived. He was as composed and calculating as ever. His eyes landed on Min, softening momentarily before his usual cold demeanor returned. "So, this is Min," he said, his voice measured. Vi stood, shielding Min with her body. "You can see him, but only on our terms. You have no right to take him from us." Mr. Heismer, "No right. Legally, he's my son. What gives you the authority to deny me? For a revelation changes everything." Before Vi could respond, Mrs. Fan stepped forward, holding a folder in her hands. "Enough. Hai, you've done enough damage. It's time you know the truth." She handed the folder to him. Inside were old DNA test results that Mr. Hai hadn't seen before. His face hardened as he read. This can't be," he stammered, his voice uncharacteristically shaky. Mrs. Fan nodded. "Yes, Hai, Min isn't yours. The initial test was falsified by someone working for you. Min is Kwang An's son." The revelation stunned everyone. Kwang An stared at his mother, then at Vi, hope and disbelief mingling in his expression. "Is this true?" Kwang An asked Vi. Tears welled up in V's eyes. "I didn't know, Kwang An. I thought." Kwang An pulled her into an embrace, his voice breaking. "It doesn't matter. You and Min have always been my family." 5. Mr. Hai's defeat. Faced with the truth, Mr. Hai's facade of control began to crack. He looked at Min, the boy he had fought so hard to claim, and realized the emptiness of his pursuit. Mrs. Fan spoke firmly. "Walk away. Hai. Leave them in peace, or I'll expose everything you've done. You'll lose more than just your pride. You'll lose the last bit of respect anyone has for you." Defeated, Mr. Hai stood silently for a moment before turning to leave. As he walked away, he glanced back at Min one last time, his expression a mix of regret and resignation. 6. A new chapter. With the threat of Mr. Hai gone, Vi and Kwang An finally felt a sense of security. They returned to their quiet life, free to raise Min without fear. Kwang An, now more devoted than ever, worked tirelessly to provide for their family, while Vi found solace in the simple joys of motherhood. Mrs. Fan stayed in touch. A fairy, years later. As Min grew into a bright and confident young man, Vi and Kwang An reflected on their journey. They had faced betrayal, fear, and heartbreak, but their love and resilience had final discussion questions. Was Mrs. Fan's decision to intervene the right one, or did it risk escalating the situation? How might Min's life be impacted by learning the truth about his paternity when he grows older? Could Mr. Hai ever truly change, or is he doomed to live with his regrets?